Welcome to this video on Internal Family Systems Therapy, or IFS. In this lesson, we will explore a therapeutic model that helps us understand the different parts of ourselves. IFS is a powerful way to address emotional, psychological, and behavioral issues by recognizing that the mind is not singular, but rather composed of multiple parts, each with its own motivations, emotions, and beliefs. As human beings, we sometimes experience painful emotions or impulses that can be difficult to manage. These can interfere with our lives and relationships, often leading people to seek help through psychotherapy. You might be familiar with situations where emotions seem overwhelming and behaviors feel out of control. For instance, you may find yourself reacting in ways that later leave you feeling confused or regretful. These experiences are more common than you might think. Many of us struggle with emotions, reactions, or impulses that don't seem to make any sense. We might react passive-aggressively, lash out in anger, overindulge in food, use mood-altering substances, or engage in risky behaviors we later regret. Often, many of us try to deal with these feelings by suppressing them, numbing them, avoiding them, criticizing themselves, or fighting against their impulses. While these behaviors might provide temporary relief, it doesn't resolve the underlying issues. In fact, it can make things worse over time. This is where a therapeutic approach called Internal Family Systems, or IFS, can offer a new understanding of how the mind works. IFS is frequently used as an evidence-based psychotherapy, helping people heal by accessing and healing their protective and wounded inner parts. IFS creates inner and outer connectedness by helping people first access their self, and from that core come to understand and heal their parts. According to IFS, our emotions and impulses come from different parts of ourselves, sometimes referred to as subpersonalities. Each of these parts has its own feelings, motivations, and way of viewing the world. For instance, you may have a part that gets angry or lashes out, or a part that overeats when you're feeling stressed. These parts are not just irrational reactions. Instead, they are doing their best to protect you from pain or discomfort, often based on experiences from earlier in life. Each of these parts is trying to help you, or ask for unmet needs, even though their methods may be misguided or harmful in the long run. The different parts of ourselves are like very sophisticated psychological software, designed to get us into the state of mind that will best help us cope with the life tasks facing us. Thus, just as the computer might have an accounting program for keeping track of our finances, we have an analytical part of ourselves that gives us logical information about a situation we might find ourselves in. So we click on the Money Manager icon in our computer window if we want to balance our budget or pay our bills. For some people, it is easier to access this Money Manager program than for others. Some may not even know that this program has been loaded onto their computer. For other people, the first reaction to the bills may be a panicked child part. For others, a distracting part may automatically arise so that the task is ignored. Then somehow we find ourselves playing computer games. While our human software is infinitely more complex and adaptable than the current computer software, this Windows analogy can be very useful. An icon on our main menu represents a part of ourselves that can be activated by various situations or people, much like we activate a program by clicking on that icon, or an antivirus software that protects our computer or identity. We have the expression, "he really pushes my buttons," which usually refers to a person who activates anger or irritated parts. Other people activate different parts of us. Some might activate a romantic feeling, others fear, others a playful part of ourselves. The aroma of our favorite food activates our craving part. A little cuddly child might activate our nurturing part. A friendly person might activate our cooperative and considerate part. A large barking dog might activate a scared part. Just as with computer software, getting the program to work properly is not always easy. We might find that when we need to activate a manager program, we can't seem to get away from the games program, a use one is, or when we might benefit from having our rational parts manage a situation, our angry or frightened parts take over and get us in trouble. With computers, we need to know how to get back to the main menu where we can see the icons of all the programs and have access to them. The same is true for the human system. In parts work, the equivalent of the main menu is called the self. It is the centered place in ourselves where we can gain access to the appropriate parts when we need them. Instead of fighting these parts, trying to get rid of them, or judging them, internal family systems encourages us to approach them with curiosity and compassion. When we take the time to get to know these parts, understand what they need, and befriend them, they no longer have to act out in harmful ways. By working with these parts, we can also nurture the more vulnerable, wounded aspects of ourselves, those childlike parts that may be holding on to past hurts. When these wounded parts feel accepted and loved, it can lead to transformation, healing, and growth. Amazing changes take place in how we feel about ourselves. Our confidence and self-esteem begin to improve, and the difficult thoughts and feelings that once seemed overwhelming begin to fade or soften. Over time, this inner work helps create more emotional balance and allows us to live in a way that feels more authentic and joyful. The human mind is not a single entity with occasional irrational feelings. Rather, it's a complex system made up of interacting parts, much like an internal family. We all have different parts, such as protective parts, wounded child parts, and nurturing parts. By embracing these parts with compassion, we can transform our inner world and, in turn, live more fulfilling lives. It's important to note that this doesn't mean you have a multiple personality disorder in the extreme example that gets misrepresented in movies or TV shows. We all have these parts, and it's a natural part of how our psyche works. Chances are you have been using the language of parts, identifying with them, your whole life. Many therapeutic approaches, dating back to Carl Jung, have recognized the existence of subpersonalities. Internal family systems therapy is one of the most effective and sophisticated methods for working with these parts, and it has helped many people achieve lasting emotional healing. By learning to understand and work with the different parts of ourselves, we can create a healthier relationship with our emotions and behaviors, leading to greater well-being, healing, transformation, and personal growth. Let's take a closer look at the IFS perspective of the human psyche. IFS provides us with a new, unique way of looking at the human psyche. The human psyche is the entirety of the human mind, including both the conscious and unconscious parts. The word psyche has a long history, dating back to ancient Greek philosophers like Plato and Heraclitus. It was used in older philosophy and psychology to refer to the cause or source of human nature. According to Sigmund Freud, the psyche consists of the id, the ego, and the superego, and it functions at different levels: the conscious, preconscious, and subconscious. Mostly we think of ourselves as having sensible emotions and taking practical, rational actions. Of course, we recognize that occasionally irrational feelings like rage or fear pop up. We realize that sometimes we don't act in our own best interest, like when we can't discipline ourselves to live a healthy lifestyle. This causes us distress because we see it as a deviation from what should be a unitary, sensible personality. When these character defects happen a lot, we think there must be something wrong with us. IFS sees human beings as complex systems of interacting parts, which are natural divisions of the personality. Suppose a part of you is trying to develop healthy habits and wants to go for a walk, and another part wants to watch TV and munch on salty and sweet snacks. When you crave that piece of cake at midnight, IFS states, it isn't just a desire that comes up from time to time. There is a mini personality inside you that repeatedly needs more of a sense of sweet fullness. It has reasons why it feels it must have that dessert. It might need to push down anger or fill an unbearable sensation of emptiness. This part has memories that drive these needs, for example, feeling emotionally hungry as a child. You may hear a different inner voice saying, eat a piece of celery instead, or you are disgusting, look how you gorged yourself. You may think of these as just intrusive thoughts that pop up, but they come from another part of you whose job it is to control your eating. It could be concerned with your waistline or your health. It might believe that you won't be loved if you aren't thin. And it may have memories of being ridiculed for being overweight in grade school. But these are simple concepts that only begin to touch on the richness and complexity of our inner life. Our inner family may include the lonely child, the wise mentor, the angry adolescent, the stern mother, the calm meditator, the magician, the happy animal, the critical protector, the people pleaser, the class clown, the fixer, and so on. IFS is more than just a non-pathologizing evidence-based psychotherapy used in clinical settings. It is also a way of understanding personal and intimate relationships and stepping into life with the 8 C's. Confidence, calm, compassion, courage, creativity, clarity, curiosity, and connectedness. Professionals from many different backgrounds such as, but not limited to, body workers, legal mediation, school administration, life coaches, and religious leaders have used IFS to inform and guide their work. IFS was developed in the 1980s by psychologist Richard Schwartz. In his work as a family therapist, Schwartz began to observe patterns in how people described their inner lives. What I heard repeatedly were descriptions of what they often called their parts, the conflicted sub-personalities that resided within them, Schwartz says. He began to conceive of the mind as a family, and the parts as family members interacting with one another. Exploring how these components functioned with one another was the foundation for IFS and the idea of the core self. Parts work is a central concept in IFS. We all have parts of ourselves that we may struggle with, like the part that drinks too much or feels insecure. But IFS helps us see these parts as just that, parts of ourselves, not the whole. This perspective is more respectful because it recognizes that no one is defined by one part of themselves. For instance, someone isn't just a problem drinker, but a complex person with a part that turns to alcohol for comfort. By seeing these parts for what they are, we can step back and approach them with curiosity and compassion. One of the most fascinating aspects of internal family systems therapy is how it empowers clients to essentially become their own therapist. In this approach, clients connect with what can be called their best self or deeper self right from the start. This connection doesn't take years to develop, and it's incredibly valuable because it helps clients reach beyond just managing symptoms. They can access a more fully resourced state. In a way, it's like discovering a more enlightened version of yourself, even if you don't feel that way now. Most people understand they have different parts of their personality. Maybe one part of you wants to go for a job promotion, but another part feels like it's safer to stay invisible. Or part of you feels confident, while another part constantly tells you you're not good enough. Some parts of us we like, other parts we don't like, and some parts we might even be afraid of, like the inner critic that comes out when we make mistakes. This idea of parts is pretty intuitive for most people. However, some might think the idea of parts sounds a little too much like New Age woo-woo or unscientific, but it's actually grounded in neuroscience. Our brains are like parallel processors, running multiple programs at once. Many of the ways we react to the world come from what's known as implicit memory, which is more about learned behavior than facts. Think of it like muscle memory. You don't have to consciously think about how to ride a bike, you just do it. In the same way, much of how we navigate life comes from automatic responses we've learned over time. These parts of us form from our experiences, especially during childhood. For example, if a child's mother was critical, they may have learned to hold back and be cautious around her. But with their father, who was more relaxed, they might feel safe to be themselves. These different parts of us develop to help us survive in various situations. As we grow, these patterns of behavior stick with us, showing up not just around our parents but in similar situations, like with a critical boss or a demanding partner. IFS also teaches that there are no bad parts. Even parts that seem harmful, like the inner critic or the part that overeats, are trying to protect us in some way. They've learned that behaving in certain ways will help us survive. But instead of fighting these parts, IFS encourages us to listen to them, understand their fears, and approach them with compassion. When we do that, these parts can step back, allowing us to take charge in a healthier way. This approach to therapy involves slowing down, becoming mindful, and talking to the parts of ourselves that cause us pain or discomfort. Each part has its own history, its own story about why it acts the way it does. And by understanding that history, we can begin to heal. It's like the quote from Longfellow: "If we could read the secret history of our enemies, we should find in each man's life sorrow and suffering enough to disarm all hostility." That same wisdom applies to how we view our own parts. Each part has suffered in its own way, and by understanding that, we can let go of judgment and begin to heal. In IFS, the goal is to bring these parts into harmony, allowing us to move forward with greater self-awareness and compassion. While some of this might sound abstract, it's based on real science. IFS works by changing implicit memory, helping us process old patterns in new ways, so that we can live more freely and peacefully. In IFS sessions, you'll work with the practitioner to explore your internal world, identify your parts, and build your self-leadership skills. The process is collaborative and tailored to your unique experiences. IFS can be a transformative journey of self-discovery, healing, and growth. It helps to have a witness to your part's work, like an accountability partner, coach, therapist, or counselor, to guide you every step of the way, and act as a parts detective or offering a second opinion as you build a more compassionate and harmonious relationship with yourself. The series of videos on IFS will dive deeper into these ideas. But for now, the key takeaway is that IFS helps you discover a deeper version of yourself by learning to relate to your parts with kindness and curiosity. IFS therapy can be used to help individuals, couples, and families. It can be integrated and effectively used to address a variety of conditions and symptoms. For challenges such as depression, anxiety, panic, phobias, trauma, substance use, physical health, and medical conditions such as rheumatoid arthritis, general functioning in daily life, and holistic health and wellness. IFS may not be appropriate for clients with severe mental illnesses that involve psychosis or paranoia, such as schizophrenia. Describing a person as having parts may be unproductive, re-traumatizing, or harmful. In 2015, IFS was designated as an evidence-based practice on the National Registry for Evidence-Based Programs and Practices, a database created by the U.S. Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. For example, a small randomized controlled trial found that IFS could help with pain, physical functioning, depressive symptoms, and self-compassion in rheumatoid arthritis patients. Another found that IFS was effective in treating depression symptoms among a sample of young women. Still, IFS does not have as strong of an evidence base as other forms of therapy. IFS is talk therapy in which you work with a therapist to identify and understand the specific sub-personalities or families that make up your internal mental system. Once you identify these parts, the therapist will help you acknowledge your feelings about these suppressed emotions. Learn how to release these feelings so you are freer to address the actual problem and ultimately find more positive ways to manage conflicts on your own. The therapist may suggest certain tools to help you do this, such as guided meditations, relaxation exercises, visualization activities, keeping a parts journal, and creating a genogram chart that illustrates the relationship between self and the different parts of you. That concludes this lesson, an introduction to the IFS theory and brief overview of the approach. In future videos, we will discuss ways of accessing parts, blending and unblending, concerned parts stopping you from doing parts work, staying on track, getting to know parts, developing trust between the parts and self, appreciating all your parts, working harmoniously to find exiled parts, cooperatively healing and unburdening exiles, integrating protective parts and exiles with the self, and working with IFS and your relationships with others. This video is part of the Strengthening Your Conscious Self program. I encourage you to watch the IFS-related videos from the other content creators in the playlists and subscribe to their channels. You should watch their videos in this order: Kenny Dennis, Richard Schwartz, Lucas Forstmeyer, Tori Olds, Jennifer May, Greg Dorter, Connor McMillan, Derek Scott, Tim Fortescue, Christine Dixon, and Dawn Elise Snipes. I invite you to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you can keep up with all the content. New content is added every day. Congratulate yourself and reward yourself for taking this time, and be compassionate toward yourself by continuing to watch the upcoming videos on implementing this practice in your daily life. May you develop peace, harmony, and stability in your internal family system.